heard somebody use the analogy of putting like a container or something on the water and pushing the container down, down, down. And there's still air in the container. And so you know as soon as you let go of that container, it's going to pop right back up. For me, that's such a great analogy of what happens when we suppress those emotions and try to detach.
I'm Jen Quesnel. Welcome to another episode of Dear Beth, a Women-in-Law podcast. On this episode, the put-downs, the insensitive comments, the words, the behavior, and the actions that lead women to feel shut down, shut out, and silenced. Why do these things happen? And what should we do when we see them happening to other people or to ourselves? This and much more coming up on Dear Beth. Now, at the start of the show, we heard the voice of Brenda Yoon. She's a lawyer and research advisor with Cowichan tribes out in Cobble Hill, British Columbia. And Brenda has looked at some of the underlying reasons behind incivility at work. We'll hear from her just ahead in the podcast. But first, I'd like to introduce our co-pilot today, Brea Lowenberger. She's a co-editor of the book this podcast is based on, Creating a Seat at the Table, Reflections from Women-in-Law. Hi, Brea.
Hi, Jen.
Okay, we should take a moment to introduce you to our listeners. And not only are you a co-editor of this amazing collection, along with Beth Bilson and with Leah Howie, you're also the Access to Justice Coordinator for Access to Justice in Saskatchewan. You're the director of this initiative called Create Justice. And you're also a sessional lecturer for the College of Law here at the University of Saskatchewan. That's a lot on your plate.
Yeah, thank you for the kind introduction.
Well, and on top of that, I understand you're also into travel, you make music, you're an artist in some ways, which kind of makes me wonder, how did law enter the picture for you? And if you weren't doing law, what would you be doing?
That is an excellent question that I go back to quite often in terms of where am I headed? And I actually couldn't see myself doing anything else but this role right now. I get to do all of the things I love to do and connect with a variety of stakeholders to implement change in the justice system. And that's all thanks to funding from the Law Foundation of Saskatchewan and support from the College of Law. So I'm incredibly grateful to be doing what I'm doing.
I am really excited about today's topic, so let's jump in and introduce our guest.
Sounds good. Joining us from Winnipeg, Manitoba, where she is a criminal lawyer and a mom, is Brooke Johnson Isaak. Brooke is one of our contributors to the Creating a Seat at the Table, and her chapter is called Don't Use Other Women for Kindling. Hi, Brooke, and welcome to the Dear Beth podcast.
Hello. Thank you both so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Okay, we have to start with your chapter title, Brooke. Don't Use Other Women for Kindling. Definitely a provocative title. What made you choose it?
So I'm new into my career still. I'm about 7 years in, but something that I've continued to see over time and experience and hear from other women around me is you'll hear your colleagues talk about, oh, I just had a really rough court appearance with so-and-so, or I had a really tough phone call with opposing counsel, or a rough conversation with this senior partner. And in all of these scenarios, it was a female on the other side. And everybody around says, oh, don't worry, they just tend to be really tough on other women. Don't take it personally. And when this first happened, I thought, well, that's very strange given what we know about women in law and the attrition rates and things of that nature. Why would women be hard on other women? So I thought at first, this is a one-off. This is not something that is going to continue. It's not something that is going to be common. But I found myself to be quite incorrect in that assumption. Oftentimes, other women in the profession who are senior to you or have a position of power, sometimes, this isn't always, but sometimes can be really, really hard on women in particular. I guess casting it in the most generous light, maybe what they're trying to do there is ensure that women coming up in the profession are extremely keen and are on top of their materials and are doing their best. And maybe what they're trying to do is push us to greatness.
And it's funny, trying to be generous about it is one thing, but it does feel reckless. And in your chapter, you illustrate this well. Even when you say never meet your heroes, can you tell us a little bit of the backstory of that and how sometimes you feel that silencing from the women who you once looked up to?
Absolutely. That was a tough one. And that's a saying that we've heard many, many times, right? And I always thought that's such a weird thing to say. Who wouldn't want to meet their heroes? It's a dream, right? Yeah, in that particular scenario, I very uncomfortably learned where that saying came from and what it meant. There was a panel that was held that I had been asked to be a contributor to, and I was very excited to do it. And when I found out who the other panelists were, I was over the moon. I was so excited because all of them were incredible women that I very much looked up to and hoped to emulate throughout my career. But one in particular was like my shining star. And leading up to this panel, I had been asked to write an article for a publication. And at the time, there was a lot of discussion surrounding robing in the courtrooms and robing rooms specifically in Ontario, and making sure that the robing rooms for female lawyers and the robing rooms for male lawyers were the same, and that women weren't getting dressed for court in like some back closet that somebody found for them.
That was the situation, wasn't it? It was basically a broom closet for the women, while the men had what looked like almost a country club, like change room with couches and like a lounge.
Yeah, and so that discussion was very much at the forefront of conversations at the time that this panel was happening. And so the publication had asked me to write something kind of tangential to this, but it ended up being what I wrote about was that professionalism is defined visually in a very archaic and masculine way. You know, you're expected to wear a suit, usually that it be dark gray or black or navy, and that you're not really to differ from that too much. You'll draw attention to yourself and you could be seen as unprofessional. So basically the gist of the article was just don't feel as though you have to make yourself uncomfortable in order to fit in and be taken seriously. You have gotten here based on your merit, based on your intelligence, based on your perseverance, and a whole bunch of other things that have nothing to do with a black suit. So feel free to represent yourself in a way that is true to you. And I think that that will do wonders for the profession as a whole.
This is a formal setting, and they've sat your hero. Is she right directly next to you?
Directly next to me, yes. Her topic was much different because she has a lot more wisdom to share with everybody who is there. Like, she has decades of experience that she can draw upon to say, like, hey, here has been my experience as a woman in law through all of these different times in our society. So I was super excited to hear what she had to say. I brought a pen and paper, and even though I was a panelist, I was ready to make my notes and glean as much wisdom from her as possible. Unfortunately, instead of spending her time on the topic that she had been asked to speak on, she spent the entirety of her time taking down or taking a very oppositional stance to the article that I had written. So she went first and did that, and then they say, okay, Brooke, it's your turn now. And I'm sitting right next to her, and immediately next, I have to then start discussing in front of this person with far more power, who I very much looked up to. And I had to now address the audience. It was a tough situation, and I will admit that throughout her 20-minute time allotment, I became distracted somewhat because my focus shifted from soaking up all of the wisdom that I thought she was going to offer to, okay, how do I now speak on what I am to speak on for the benefit of the people who have attended while not offending this person, and also fearing in my mind what is going to happen to me in my career. How do I now appear before this person in court? How do I navigate other professional situations when I now know that this person seems to, for some reason, have it out for me?
I can see Brea nodding here. And Brea, I don't know if you were at that seminar or if this is ever something that you've also run into personally, but the whole idea of women just sort of ripping into each other in a professional setting. Have you ever experienced this too? Like, and as you're hearing Brooke talk, what's going through your mind?
Well, I have and continue to work with many amazing women and others who have gone out of their way to mentor and support me. That said, as Brooke puts it, everyone knows the story, has heard a story, has a story. And when you hear this question, something inevitably pops into mind. And I want to mention some of Michaela Kiner's writing on women are not at fault for this. Sexism has long been, as she says, normalized in many spaces, and many women have been taught to internalize these beliefs. And so for me, what I would say, I've experienced more microaggressions, those little disorienting moments where that comment, that gesture, that experience just didn't feel right. And my observation is that often such moments seem to be unintentional. Some are intentional, but often unintentional, and point to the real ongoing need to confront these implicit and explicit biases that, as Kiner put it, have been so ingrained and normalized.
Yeah. In Brooke's chapter, you've written betrayal rarely comes from your enemies. And you talk about the microaggressions, the little comments, even Brooke, in your chapter, there was a spot where you said, how could an A-line skirt make someone so mad? And yet sometimes they do. Where is this coming from? Why is it that sometimes as women we turn on each other?
So I want to absolutely echo what Brea has said, and I agree. Specifically in law, there is, as much as we try to fight against it, and I think it's getting better, there is a spirit of competition. I think what we see happening is that women historically within law were in the minority. Now we are usually around 50 to 52 to 53% of graduating classes. That was not the case many years ago. That was not the case when this particular hero of mine would have completed law school or started her career or spent the majority of her career. And I think women who were in law way back when, they were constantly told, you're really lucky to be here. You're one of one. And it was constantly ingrained in their minds that they're lucky to be there. There's only room for one of me because all you look around and see are men, right? And I'm the lucky female who got to be here and who gets to continue to be here. So when other women enter the scene, I think maybe an unconscious bit of self-preservation starts in the brain. And whether you are aware of it or not, other women can be seen as a threat, even though in reality they're not. There's no world or universe or galaxy in which I was a threat to this woman. We had entirely different positions in society, in our professions, in everything. There was no threat there. But I think that it's possible that where some of these hurtful moments come from, woman to woman within the profession, comes from a place of being told for years, I'm lucky to be here. I'm the only woman at the table. There's only room for one of me. So anybody else coming in is a threat. And I like my position. I worked hard for this position. I want to keep this position. And no one is going to take it from me. And it's unfortunate because it's not a result of that person being a bad person. It's a result of their socialization within the profession.
Yeah, and in your chapter, Brooke, you also talk about silencing in the workplace. What happened in those experiences?
Yeah, so those are a little bit less direct. I think where silencing really takes effect is when there's a multitude of events that have happened in combination with one another. It's kind of the death by a thousand cuts situation. As I mentioned in the chapter, I was frustrated with the definition of professionalism that existed and how that impacted many people that I saw around me, And so I took a stand against it in kind of an obvious and obtuse way where I was like, I'm going to wear pink. You know, there's a woman in the room and nobody is going to be able to ignore it because I'm going to wear a bright pink dress. I'm just going to be loud about the fact that a female is here and is participating in this process in a meaningful way. And so I was very loud about it. I had started a blog and it was about embracing your femininity, not quieting it, and trying to display for people that you can express your femininity because so many of the norms are masculine. So I was trying to say you can express your femininity in an outward way, and that doesn't detract from your abilities, your intelligence, anything to do with the job, right? And there were a surprising amount of people who took issue with that and the fact that I was being as loud about it as I was. And I don't want to sound as though I was making an attempt to be obnoxious. I was just so sick of people not talking about it out loud because there were so many conversations that would happen between women and we'd be speaking about something that was really impacting us. And all of a sudden our voices would get quieter. And someone would say, just a minute, I'm going to close the door for this conversation. And so all of these conversations were happening between women in quiet, hushed tones behind closed doors. And I was sick of it. I was like, no, we need to have these conversations in the open because if we never raise the issues to the surface, how are we ever going to find solutions?
Right.
So my entire point of the blog was to just have these conversations out loud and invite anybody who wanted to participate in that conversation to take part. I would say forms of silencing began to take place. So whether it was just cold shoulders when I would see them, whereas they used to be quite friendly, or to the other end of the spectrum where it actually impacts your career and you're no longer getting assignments from that person, or you're being shut out of different types of work. And sometimes it was more overt. There were times that, and again, unfortunately, it was women who were saying, you just need to stop having these conversations because the men that you work with are having to answer questions about it.
Yeah, why can't you just shut it down, blend in, just be somebody that we don't notice very much? That also doesn't give men the opportunity to wear a pink shirt when they feel like it.
Exactly. It's a stifling thing for everybody. And I'm saying this as a white woman who's heterosexual, who has many privileges in those ways. There are other people who have to mask far more than I do to feel as though they fit in the workplace.
Okay, you do have great style. We've all had conversations about this, about your TikTok, Brooke, and just you do like a week in workwear videos. How did you find the confidence? How did you decide, no, this is where I'm going to take a stand? Like, also, how do you put together the outfits? I have so many questions about this.
So when it comes to TikTok and I guess social media in general, I honestly had gotten to a point in my life where I had given everything to work. I didn't have any free time. I was spending all my time doing work. When I wasn't working, I was doing law-related volunteering. I was writing legal blogs. I was giving everything to the profession. And I realized, even though I love my job and I love practicing law, I love criminal law, I was like, I cannot be this one-dimensional human. That's not how we were built to be. That's not how we were built to live. I was like a retired person that was like, I need a hobby. I need to do something different. I need to do something that is actually just for me that I enjoy. It's healthy to do something that I enjoy, that challenges me, that I have to learn a new skill set for. And so that's kind of how it started. And I've always just really enjoyed fashion. And for a long time, I was kind of ashamed of that interest of mine because it seems as though we're constantly pushed with the idea of if you're into fashion, beauty, anything of that nature, that indicates a lack of intelligence. It's like intelligence and wanting to put together like a sick outfit. Those two things don't go hand in hand.
Yeah, it's seen as like fluffy and too girly girl.
And that goes back to kind of the larger picture that I'm talking about here that is so frustrating, that so many things that are associated with femininity are deemed to be lesser than. They're fluffy. They're not professional. They're not intelligent. They're just little frilly hobbies, and I was just like, I reject that idea. I can be intelligent. I can be a great lawyer. I can also love to put together an outfit. And those two things don't need to be mutually exclusive.
Brooke, to me, what I'm thinking about as you're talking is that well individuals make up well organizations, firms, make and create, healthy systems. And so you found something that keeps you well, keeps you happy, keeps you motivated. And I think that's something to highlight.
Well, this is where I want to bring back Brenda Yoon. If you remember her from the start of the podcast, she's done her master's on trauma-informed lawyering and following the teachings of trauma-informed practice. And we're starting to see a lot of this in other areas, like even healthcare, for example. So the whole idea is trying to reduce the amount of trauma that we have in services. So in law, this might mean that lawyers recognize the trauma their clients are bringing with them, recognize the way our legal system might exacerbate or create extra trauma. And in Brenda's thesis, she argues that a trauma-informed lawyer goes further and examines the impact their own experiences and trauma might have as a lawyer, the effect that these personal experiences might have on their work. Have a listen.
Law is overall a profession where individuals that come into law school are told to set aside their emotions, to divorce a portion of themselves away from the case or the work so that they can be more rational. What neuroscience and researchers are finding is that emotions are actually vital to us making sense of the world, and that includes reasoning. So emotions are actually a piece that allows us to be able to form our perception of the world. And so when we go into why does incivility happen in the profession, why is it that sometimes women may be even more incivil towards each other? I'm sure there's a lot of reasons for it. Trauma would, I think, be one of them. And that can come from vicarious trauma or indirect trauma, where the lawyer is working with really stressed out clients who have their own unique and sometimes horrifying circumstances. That impacts their lawyer that they're working with. And if we are working in these high stress environments, but telling ourselves to not focus on it being stressful or sad or upsetting, we shove those emotions down. That can also lead to more aggression. Forcing those emotions down doesn't make them go away.
And again, that is the voice of Brenda Yoon. She's a lawyer and a research advisor with Cowichan Tribes out in Cobble Hill, British Columbia. And Brea, Brooke, you've both heard of the saying, hurt people. And just listening to Brenda, what goes through your mind, Brea?
Our objective with the episode is to name the issue of incivility through research data and sharing through Brooke some anonymous examples. And Brenda so helpfully indicates the first step to addressing any problem is awareness of what the issue is. And so Brenda's comments really highlight to me the need for, in law and other professions, the need for rigorous reflective practice and the ability to stay well, to be able to self-reflect, to be able to critically reflect on experiences, and as a lawyer, be the self-directed lifelong learner, not just reflecting on practice and how well that case went, but how you're showing up, maintaining your wellness and owning that, because we hope that our employer will facilitate a well environment. But ultimately, it's up to us as individuals.
And Brooke, just any thoughts that go through your head after hearing Brenda?
Absolutely. Something that comes to mind is that our job is inherently difficult. Lawyers aren't getting involved with people at the best of times. Usually they're in a time of crisis, whether they have been criminally charged or they've lost a family member because of what someone else has done. Maybe they're going through marital issues or employment issues where they've been wrongfully dismissed. The ways in which people can seek out a lawyer are many, and it's very rarely good for them. And so the job in and of itself is full of secondhand trauma. We are constantly taking in terrible information that has to live somewhere, right? And the job is hard enough in and of itself. There are high pressures. There is a standard of perfectionism. When you are working in an environment that is that difficult just because of the nature of the work, I think there is a duty on every person within that profession to treat each other well and do what they can to not add to the pile on. What I am encouraging everybody to do is, if you have something bad to say, specifically if it's to another woman in the profession, just don't. Just keep it to yourself. You may think that you're helping. You may not think that you're helping, and you may think that you're just making yourself feel better by popping yourself up on putting someone else down. But it's really not benefiting anybody. It's not benefiting you. It's not benefiting the listener, and it's certainly not benefiting the profession as a whole.
Don't build a fire and burn down other women with it.
Absolutely.
Well, before you go, there is one final perspective that I wanted to share with the podcast. Tiffany Paulson, KC, is a partner at Robertson Stromberg here in Saskatoon. It's the only sort of big law firm in Saskatchewan that has 50% women at their partnership table. And that's out of a law firm of like 30 lawyers. So we asked Tiffany about some of the ways that she lifts up and supports other women at work. Here's what she told us.
One of my guiding principles from even before my legal career is you can be what you see. As someone who's a 25-year call, I also still have young children at home. Being a senior lawyer with young children and a partner in a large firm, it's important for me to be visible about my priorities outside the office, which means I don't make a secret of the fact that I'm leaving at 4:30 to go watch my daughter's hockey game. I don't make a secret of the fact that I like to stay at home and so I can take my kids to school. I like to walk them to school, and I'm going to take advantage of that, and I'm not going to apologize for it either. So when women who are more junior to me see that I have normalized and prioritized my family and my family values in conjunction with being an excellent lawyer, they don't feel obligated to sneak out of the office because they have childcare responsibilities or aging parent responsibilities or any type of family responsibilities that women are typically primarily responsible for. We just need to accept that as part of day-to-day living as opposed to being secretive or judgmental about it.
And once again, that's Tiffany Paulson, KC. She's a partner with Robertson Stromberg in Saskatoon. And what comes to mind just listening to that? Brooke?
I'm like beaming from the inside out. As soon as you said you asked Tiffany Paulson to speak on this, there is no better person you could have asked.
She's awesome, right? Like, just,
yeah. She's amazing, yes. And she's just an amazing person in general, but also lawyer in our community for women to look up to. Hearing what she had to say is such an important message for everybody, and it certainly hits home for me on a personal level right now, being that I have a 2-year-old, and there's a lot of different things that pull at your time that compete with your work. And it's difficult sometimes. There's that feeling of guilt that creeps in on both sides, right? When you are parenting, sometimes you have guilt that you're not being a good lawyer. And sometimes when you are working at your job, you have guilt that you're not being a great parent, because we can't be everywhere all the time. I think that is such an important thing for not just young lawyers, not just female lawyers, but for everybody to see, because it's something that needs to be normalized. And it's important to see that you can achieve a KC designation. You can become a partner at a law firm. You can be successful in community positions as well, because I know it wasn't included when you were discussing her, but she served the city of Saskatoon for many, many years. She's done so many things for the profession, for the legal community, and for the greater community of Saskatoon. She's done all of those things well, and she's done them while having a family, and it's incredible.
What really comes to mind for me hearing Tiffany is life is too short. I hope that both women and others take her advice. The visibly leading by example and normalizing putting family first is so inspiring to me. And that takes intention, that takes self-awareness of your values and your priorities, and continued enactment, of your boundaries, since every day there is always a work reason not to leave at 5:30. So such valuable advice.
Thank you so much for being here, both of you. Thank you so much, Brooke.
Thank you so much for having me. I genuinely really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.
And thank you for being so brave in sharing your stories, Brooke. And again, the first step to any change is awareness. And as you say in your chapter, bringing voice to these issues. I think what's really exciting in terms of culture shift, a big step has been putting this in writing, so to speak. The Law Society of Saskatchewan in April of 2023 approved amendments to their Code of Professional Conduct relating to issues of discrimination and harassment. So not only are we having these conversations, but it's in writing. And so I think there's a lot of forward momentum to addressing these issues.
I think that means keep up the TikToks.
I'll work in a hair wash day, and then we'll get another one going soon here.
Thank you to Brooke Johnson Isaak, who was our guest today. Brooke's a criminal lawyer and a mother. She joined us from Winnipeg. And if you'd like to follow that TikTok, her account is Brooke, BROOKE.JI. Brooke Johnson Isaak. We'll also put her socials in our show notes. You can go look her up, follow her. And thank you so much to our co-host today, to Brea Lowenberger. Thank you both for joining us here on Dear Beth.
Thank you, Jen. It was fun.
Today is a very special letter segment here at Dear Beth, a Women in Law podcast. Joining us as always, our co-editor of Creating a Seat at the Table, Beth Bilson. Now, the part that makes today a bit special, our other studio guest, Kate Bilson. Now, Kate works for TC Energy in Calgary. She is their Chief Privacy Officer and Manager of the Privacy Office. And yes, Kate Bilson is also Beth Bilson's daughter. Hello, Kate. Hello, Beth. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
Hi, it's great to be here.
And I love this whole mother-daughter dynamic that we can kind of get going. And I understand that you're a lawyer, just like Mom. And at what point in your life did you think, yeah, I'm definitely going to follow in her footsteps?
Well, that's a good question because I actually never planned to be a lawyer. My original plan was to be a dance therapist. And so I started down that path, and for a variety of reasons, it didn't work out. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll pivot into psychology. And then I ended up in law school. And when I was in first year law, I spent most of that year thinking, what am I doing here?
It certainly was kind of a surprise when she decided to go to law school. Kate and her brother were quite young when I went to law school. And I always thought that the chaos that descended on our household when I was in law school would put both of them off ever thinking about being a lawyer. When she announced she was going to law school, I was quite surprised. It was quite a change for her.
If I count this properly, then your older brother is a lawyer. Your mom is a lawyer, Kate. You are a lawyer. Your sister-in-law, your brother's wife, is also a lawyer?
And my husband.
Are you serious? What do you talk about at family dinners?
And her stepson.
And my stepson, yes, and his soon-to-be wife. So it is a family of lawyers.
Oh, and that has got to, have led to some interesting discussions over the years. Am I pointed in the right direction? Do I have the people around me that I need to build and lift and support me? Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. And that's kind of what we're talking about on today's podcast, just the covert forms of silencing that sometimes happen when women come into their own in their legal careers. And often those covert actions are sometimes led by other women. And I'm wondering, Beth, have you sort of witnessed this, or do you recall feeling it even early on in your career?
I have certainly witnessed it, and I would say that I have experienced it a bit in my career, although certainly not as much as some people, but I can think of a few instances where the will of other women to raise themselves to the top of the tree meant that they were hard, I think, particularly on other women. Certainly at the time I started being involved in the legal profession, I think there was a sense that there was a certain limit to the number of spots for women. Therefore, if you wanted to achieve your own goals, you would have to make sure that you were in position to gain the spot.
Like elbows up,
needed.
fight
Yes,
for that spot. Yeah. What have you seen? I mean, and because you picked up with law decades after your mom did.
I think I've been a little bit surprised at different points in my career that that kind of behavior still exists. I can remember as a law student interviewing for articling positions, for example, being quite stunned by some of the questions I was being asked by female lawyers in my interviews. Things like, are you planning to have children? And I had somebody ask me why I would bother doing a dance studies certificate program if I was going to end up in law school. And I just remember thinking, I thought we'd come so much further than this. But I think through the course of my career, I have seen other examples. But at the same time, I've also been fortunate enough not to necessarily be the target of those behaviors and have been able to find ways to help people move out of them. But it does still surprise me. I think there is this element that still exists where we constantly have to prove ourselves as women.
What do you say? I mean, when you see this happening, or if somebody comes to you and says, look, I don't feel like I can speak up, or I don't feel like I can do the best job I can because I'm ground down by some of the women around me, often senior women. What would be your advice?
I think they have to find other support. I think look for other mentors or other supporters or people to convey to them that they're doing all right and that they're not wasting the time of everybody around them, and they deserve to be in the legal profession.
Yeah, I think, I've spent quite a bit of time as a more senior lawyer, sometimes ruminating over those moments when I was a young lawyer, and I wish I could have stood up for myself a little bit more. One incident that has stayed with me for many years now occurred when I was a young lawyer, and I was working on a significant file with a senior partner, and there was a misunderstanding of how I had been doing my work. And this individual came into my office and shut the door and started yelling at me, but didn't give me an opportunity to explain what my earlier answer to him had actually meant. And after that, I was quite shaken. I went to see another partner who was a woman, and the response I got was kind of, well, that's just how he is. And over time, I've thought about that, and I think to myself, I wish I'd had the courage to go back to him and say, I would like us to have this conversation again so that I can tell you what actually happened here and what I actually did with this piece of work. And I think if that was a young lawyer coming to me, that is what I would encourage them to do. And I would also offer to go and help them have that conversation instead of saying, that's just the way he is. I know that some of those situations where I felt that I wasn't being supported or that covert kind of behavior was going on towards me, that always made me question myself, my ability, my confidence, made me ask the question, will I actually be a good lawyer? Can I do this job? Am I the right kind of personality to be at this table? So those are some of the things that I guess still keep me up at night as a lawyer who's 20 plus years into her practice.
When we invite our listeners to send in Dear Beth questions, we are asking them to email createjustice@usask.ca. And so every episode we read a letter or two, and this one comes from Amy Lalonde, who's in first-year law, and she writes, "Is law still a boys' club? How do female lawyers have a family while working if law is such a boys' club?" So I'll put that one to you first, Kate, and then to you, Beth. Feel free, wherever you need to interrupt.
Well, I guess what I want, the hope that I want to give to the writer here, Amy, is that I have actually been fortunate enough to work in places where I've had very strong support from both my male colleagues and my female colleagues that have allowed me to embrace other areas of my life, including being a mother, which is my greatest joy. Being in workplaces that create space for people to really spend time with their families, but also see that we are strong, capable professionals as well. And so I want to, I guess, express that those workplaces do exist. And yes, there are still those moments of law as an old boys club, but I can also say that there are many other moments where law is about acceptance and diversity and holding each other up. And that is what I want first-year students in particular. As somebody who almost quit law school after first year, I just want them to hang on to that notion.
Well, and it sounds like if law was a boys' club, that's maybe part of the wallpaper that's starting to fade at this point. It's still there, and we can all see it sometimes, and we can all feel it sometimes, but it sounds like it's fading somewhat. And I'm still thinking about people who have a full-time career in law and with small children around. How do you make that balance? I mean, you did law school with the small children underfoot, and you did use the word chaos to describe what was happening on the home end.
Yes, well, I think you do have to, I wouldn't say lower your standards, but the idea the idea that your kitchen floor is going to be scrubbed every evening that's unlikely to happen if you are trying to combine a legal career and a family. But I think every family works it out. One of the stories about my life in law school, when Kate was about 3, I think, we were talking about getting ready for Christmas, and she said, "Christmas, that's when Mummy cries," because the stress of law school exams was very present at Christmas time. So I always felt sorry that I had blighted this child's life.
With Christmases when Mommy cries. Oh, so many mummies out there cry at Christmas. It's okay.
I think she did a little crying herself when the time came.
Absolutely. And I still do. I still have days where I feel totally overwhelmed. And I've just kind of come to a place of that is going to happen. And I'm not a perfect person. And I don't have to pretend that everything is okay all the time. And that's, I think, that those are the incremental steps that I myself am trying to help myself make, but also other women around me to say, you know what? We're going to have hard days, and that's okay, but it doesn't make us any less good at what we do. It just makes us a human being.
I think there are many women who find themselves bringing up children by themselves. And I think in that situation, if you're going to go to law school or pursue a legal career, you want to think about what support systems you have and make sure that there are people you can call on and people who will rally round, because everything's not going to go according to plan. Somebody's going to get the flu the day you have your contracts exam, and you need to be able to figure out how you're going to deal with that sort of eventuality.
Any other thoughts?
I would say don't be afraid to ask for help, or don't be afraid to ask for alternatives. So having those conversations to find out how you keep the balance, how you deal with the situation when there isn't a balance, because that is going to happen. But you will get through it, and I think there will always be support around you to help lift you back up again.
You should see how she looks at you. It is the best thing ever because she is so proud of you, and I can see it shining in her eyes. It's really something.
Well, and I just want to say how proud I am of her. She has been one of the best role models I could ever have asked for.
So even with all the Christmases and all the tears.
That's right.
And all the chaos and never ironing a tablecloth. I don't know even who does that. Never always having a perfect floor. Still worked out okay?
Absolutely, yeah. And she's really shown me how to be a supportive, helpful person to other women in my own career.
Thank you two both so much for coming in today.
Thank you. This is great.
It was great. Kate Bilson lives in Calgary, where she is the Chief Privacy Officer and Manager in the Privacy Office for TC Energy. And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about her, we have a little bit more in our show notes. There's a link to her LinkedIn profile there. If you have a question for Dear Beth, or maybe something on the show caught your ear, feel free to drop us a line. The email is createjustice@usask.ca. That's it for this episode of Dear Beth. We record and produce this podcast on Treaty 6 territory, which is the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota nations. It's also the homeland of the Métis. We pay our respects to our First Nations and Métis ancestors, and we are grateful to be able to have these conversations and to be able to hear these stories on Treaty 6 territory. We do this while we're recognizing our own privilege, and we're mindful of how we can use this podcast to make sure diverse voices get a platform. We draw inspiration from Maria Campbell's observation that stories are a way that we can talk to each other without having barriers between us. Our team at Dear Beth is Leah Howie, Brea Lowenberger, and Beth Bilson. Hannah Jorgensen's our associate producer, and Wayne Giesbrecht is our tech. We produce this podcast in partnership with the College of Law at the University of Saskatchewan. Dear Beth is a production of Cascade Communications. I'm Jen Quesnel. Thanks for listening.